The slap echoed through the living room like a gunshot. My cheek burned, the sting spreading across my face as tears I'd learned to swallow threatened to spill. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the cruel laughter bubbling up from the couch. "About time someone put her in her place," Vivian sneered, her voice dripping with satisfaction. My mother-in-law's eyes sparkled with malice as she adjusted her designer glasses, watching me with the same expression she'd wear watching a bug being squashed. "The girl never learns." My sister-in-law, Brielle, giggled behind her manicured hand. She had it coming, honestly. Walking around here like she owns the place. I stood frozen, my hand pressed against my burning cheek, tasting blood where my teeth had cut the inside of my mouth. The humiliation was worse than the pain. 3 years of this. 3 years of being their punching bag, their entertainment, their outlet for every cruel impulse. My husband, Trevor, flexed his fingers as if shaking off the impact. His face showed no remorse, only the satisfied look of a man who'd just reminded everyone who was in charge. "Maybe now you'll think twice before embarrassing me in front of my colleagues," he said, straightening his tie with casual indifference. "Your little outburst at dinner tonight was unacceptable, Mia. Completely unacceptable." My outburst? I'd simply asked him not to speak over me when his boss's wife had been asking about my nursing degree. That was it. That was my crime. The tears came anyway, silent and hot, streaming down my face as I stared at the three of them. Vivian lounged on her throne-like armchair, Brielle curled up on the couch like a satisfied cat, and Trevor standing over me like some conquering general. None of them heard the front door open. None of them noticed the measured footsteps crossing the marble entryway. But I did. I turned toward the living room entrance just as my father stepped into view, flanked by 2 men in military fatigues. Colonel James Camden stood in the doorway, his steel-gray eyes taking in the scene with the calculating precision of a man who'd spent 30 years reading battlefields. The room fell silent. The change was instant and absolute. Trevor's satisfied smirk froze on his face. Vivian's laughter died in her throat. Brielle stopped mid-giggle, her eyes widening as she took in the 2 armed soldiers standing at attention behind my father. Dad's gaze moved slowly from my tear-streaked face to my reddening cheek, then to Trevor's still-raised hand. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air, something that made even the house itself seem to hold its breath. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, controlled, and more terrifying than any shout could ever be. "Gentlemen," he said to his companions, never taking his eyes off Trevor, "I believe we've found our target. Before we continue, please write in the comment which country you are watching this video. We love knowing where our global family is tuning in from. And if this is your first time on this channel, please subscribe. Your support helps us bring even more epic revenge tales of life. Enjoy listening." 6 hours earlier. I should have known the evening would end badly when Vivian started rearranging the place settings. "No, no, Mia," she tutted, moving my carefully positioned salad fork for the 3rd time. "The Waterford crystal goes on the right. How many times do I have to tell you? Trevor's boss expects elegance, not whatever this is." I bit back my response and adjusted the fork again, watching as she surveyed the dining room like a general inspecting troops. Everything had to be perfect for Mr. Braxton's visit. Trevor had been angling for a promotion at the law firm for months, and tonight's dinner was supposed to seal the deal. "The flowers are too tall," Brielle announced from her perch on the kitchen counter, filing her nails while I finished the appetizers. "They'll block conversation. Honestly, Mia, it's like you've never hosted before." I wanted to say, "because you never let me." But I'd learned to keep my mouth shut. 3 years of marriage had taught me that much. Trevor appeared in the kitchen doorway, adjusting his cufflinks with that self-important air he'd perfected since making junior partner. He looked good in his tailored suit, he always did. That's what had drawn me to him in the first place, back when I was young and stupid enough to believe that charm and good looks meant something. "How much longer?" he asked, checking his Rolex. "Braxton will be here in an hour and I need everything perfect." "Almost done," I said, spooning the caramelized onion tart onto serving plates. I'd spent all afternoon making his favorite appetizer from scratch, the same way I'd learned to make all his favorite things. Small gestures of love that had somehow become requirements, expectations, demands. He moved behind me, placing his hands on my shoulders in what might have looked like affection to an observer. But I felt the tension in his grip, the subtle warning. You know how important tonight is, he murmured near my ear. Don't embarrass me. The words hit like ice water. I turned to face him, searching his eyes for some trace of the man I'd married, but finding only cold calculation. When have I ever embarrassed you? I asked quietly. His smile was sharp. There's always a first time. Vivian clapped her hands from the dining room. Trevor, darling, come look at this centerpiece. I think we need to change it entirely. He squeezed my shoulders once more, too hard, and walked away. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the tarts I'd made with such care, and wondered when my life had become a performance I could never quite get right. You're glowing, Trevor had whispered against my ear 2 years ago as we swayed on the dance floor, surrounded by 200 of our closest friends and family. My wedding dress felt like silk clouds, and the candlelight turned everything golden and magical. I love you, Mrs. Brennan, he said, spinning me gently. I'm going to take such good care of you. I believed him. God help me, I believed every word. The reception was everything I'd dreamed of, elegant, romantic, perfect. My father had walked me down the aisle in his dress blues, medals gleaming on his chest, pride shining in his eyes. Even he seemed charmed by Trevor, impressed by his law degree and his ambitious plans. He seems solid, Dad had said during our father-daughter dance. Driven. That's good in a man as long as he remembers what's really important. I'd laughed, spinning in my beautiful dress, surrounded by love and hope and possibilities. He adores me, Dad. You should see how he takes care of me. Dad's eyes had grown thoughtful. Taking care of someone isn't about what you do for them, sweetheart. It's about how you treat them when no one's watching. I'd kissed his cheek and twirled away, too young and too happy to understand the warning. The first crack appeared 6 months later. You spent how much on groceries? Trevor stood in our new kitchen holding the receipt like evidence of a crime. We just moved into the house Vivian had helped us buy, her dream house as it turned out, not mine. The same as always, I said, confused by his sudden anger. Maybe a little more because I got those steaks you like. Mia, we need to be smart about money. I'm trying to build a future for us and you're out there spending like we're millionaires. It was $80, Trevor. For the whole week. His jaw tightened. It's not about the amount. It's about the principle. I work my ass off and you just spend without thinking. I stared at him, this man I'd married, this stranger wearing Trevor's face. I'll be more careful, I said finally. Good. His smile returned, warm and loving. I'm sorry, baby. I'm just stressed about work. You understand, right? I nodded because I did understand. Or I thought I did. The second crack came a month later when I mentioned wanting to pick up extra shifts at the hospital. Absolutely not, he said, not looking up from his laptop. My wife doesn't need to work weekends. What would people think? That I'm dedicated to my career? That I can't provide for my family? Family. The word hung between us, loaded with promises and expectations I wasn't ready for. Trevor, I love nursing. It's not about the money. It's about priorities, Mia. My career has to come first right now. I need you here supporting me. Can't you do that? I did. I rearranged my schedule, turned down opportunities, made his needs my priority. Because that's what wives did, wasn't it? That's what love looked like. But late at night, lying beside him in our bed, I'd stare at the ceiling and wonder when loving someone had started to feel like losing myself. Vivian Brennan had perfected the art of cruelty disguised as concern. Oh, honey, she said, fingering the fabric of my dress at our first family dinner after the honeymoon. Is this from Target? How practical. Trevor laughed, actually laughed at his mother's backhanded compliment. Mom, not everyone can shop at Nordstrom. Of course not, Vivian smiled sweetly. I just want Mia to represent the family well. Image is so important in your father's business circle. I'd spent a week's pay on that dress, thinking it was beautiful, appropriate me. But under Vivian's scrutiny, I felt cheap and shabby and completely out of place in their pristine dining room. I could take you shopping sometime, Brielle offered with fake enthusiasm. Help you find your style. My style. As if everything I'd chosen for myself before marrying into their family was wrong. That's so thoughtful, I managed, hating how grateful I sounded. It became a pattern. Every family gathering, every holiday, every casual visit turned into a masterclass in subtle humiliation. My cooking wasn't sophisticated enough. My job wasn't prestigious enough. My family wasn't wealthy enough. My everything wasn't enough. And Trevor? Trevor did nothing. Worse than nothing, he participated. Mia made this casserole, he'd say at dinner parties, his tone apologetic. She's still learning to cook for a crowd. Mia's not much of a decorator, he'd explain when guests commented on our sparse living room. We're waiting until she develops better taste. Each casual dismissal felt like a tiny death, a small piece of myself being erased. But I told myself it was normal, that all families had their dynamics, that I just needed to try harder to fit in. The day I finally snapped was the day Vivian redecorated our bedroom. I came home from a 12-hour shift at the hospital to find my grandmother's quilt, the one thing of real value I'd brought to the marriage, crumpled in a garbage bag by the door. "Oh good, you're home," Vivian called from upstairs. "I had the most wonderful idea while you were at work. Come see." I climbed the stairs on shaking legs, the garbage bag clutched in my arms. Our bedroom had been transformed into something from a magazine, all neutral tones and expensive fabrics. Beautiful, cold, and completely without personality. "Isn't it gorgeous?" Vivian beamed. "I got rid of all those shabby little touches and gave you something worthy of Trevor's position. You'll thank me later." "My grandmother's quilt," I whispered. "Oh, that old thing? Darling, it was falling apart. I had the maid throw it away. Trust me, this is so much better." That night, when Trevor came home to find me crying over the garbage bag, he didn't comfort me. He didn't rage at his mother for overstepping. He didn't even seem to understand why I was upset. "It's just a blanket, Mia. Look at what she did for us. The room looks incredible. We should be grateful." Grateful. I should be grateful that the last piece of my grandmother had been thrown away like trash. I should be grateful to live in a beautiful prison where nothing of mine was allowed to exist. That was the night I first thought about calling my father. I didn't do it. I told myself I was being dramatic, that marriage required sacrifice, that I was lucky to have a family that cared enough to help me improve. But I kept his number in my phone, and sometimes in my darkest moments, I'd stare at it and wonder what would happen if I pressed call. The dinner party was going well. Too well, as it turned out. Mr. Braxton was a distinguished man in his 60s, with kind eyes and an easy laugh. His wife, Andrea, was warm and engaging, asking genuine questions about my work at the hospital. "Pediatric nursing must be incredibly rewarding," she said over the main course. "I've always admired people who work with children. It takes such patience and skill." I felt myself relaxing for the first time in hours. It really is wonderful. Just last week we had this little boy who'd been terrified of his surgery, and by the time he left... "Mia's being modest," Trevor interrupted smoothly. "She just does basic bedside care. Nothing too technical." The words hit like a slap. Basic bedside care. As if my 4-year degree, my certifications, my years of experience meant nothing. As if comforting frightened children and managing complex medical equipment was somehow beneath notice. Andrea frowned slightly. "Actually, pediatric nursing requires extensive specialized training. My daughter considered it before going into family practice." "Oh yes," I said, finding my voice again. "The continuing education alone is..." "Mia tends to oversell her role," Trevor cut in with a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "You know how it is. Everyone wants to sound important." The table fell quiet. Even Vivian looked uncomfortable, though whether from Trevor's rudeness or the awkwardness of the moment I couldn't tell. Mr. Braxton cleared his throat. "Actually, Trevor, I think your wife was sharing something meaningful. Andrea, you were asking about the little boy." He turned to me expectantly, and I saw something in his eyes. Respect, encouragement, genuine interest. It had been so long since someone had looked at me that way. "He was 7, I continued, my voice stronger now. Brain tumor surgery, and he was convinced he'd wake up different. So we spent hours talking about superheroes, about how sometimes people get special powers from going through hard things. When he woke up, the first thing he said was that he felt braver." Andrea's eyes misted. "That's beautiful. What a gift you gave him." "It's just part of the job," I said, but I was smiling. "No," Mr. Braxton said firmly. "That's leadership. That's the kind of emotional intelligence that makes the difference between good healthcare and exceptional healthcare." I felt something unfurl in my chest. Pride, validation, the forgotten feeling of being seen and valued. For a moment, I remembered who I used to be before I became Trevor's wife, before I let his family reshape me into their idea of acceptable. But Trevor's face was darkening with each word of praise, and I knew I'd pay for this moment later. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of forced conversation and mounting tension. I could feel Trevor's anger radiating across the table, even as he maintained his charming facade for our guests. When the Braxtons finally left, with warm handshakes and genuine compliments about the evening, I knew the mask was going to come off. I just didn't know how ugly it would get. What was that? Trevor's voice was deadly quiet as the front door closed behind our guests. Vivian and Brielle had retreated to the living room with their wine, leaving us alone in the foyer. What was what? I asked, though I knew exactly what he meant. Don't play dumb, Mia. You completely dominated the conversation. Made yourself the center of attention. Made me look like I don't appreciate my own wife. I was answering Andrea's questions. She was interested in. She was being polite. His voice rose slightly before he caught himself, glancing toward the living room. And you turned it into some kind of performance. Going on and on about your job like you're some kind of hero. I wasn't. You embarrassed me. In front of my boss. In front of the man who controls my future at the firm. I stared at him, this man I'd promised to love and honor, and felt something shift inside me. I embarrassed you by being good at my job? You embarrassed me by forgetting your place. The words hung in the air between us like a thrown gauntlet. My place. As if I were some medieval servant who dared to speak above her station. My place. I repeated slowly. You know what I mean. No, Trevor. I don't. Please explain to me exactly what my place is. His jaw tightened. Your place is supporting me. Supporting this family. Not grandstanding about bedside manner and children's stories while I'm trying to make a professional impression. I was being myself. Well, maybe that's the problem. The words hit like a physical blow. I actually stepped back, pressing my hand to my chest as if I could hold my heart together. From the living room came the sound of Vivian's laughter, high and sharp. I told you she'd ruin it, she called out. The girl has no sense of propriety. Mother, please, Trevor said, but there was no real rebuke in his voice. No, let her speak, I said, walking toward the living room. Clearly everyone has opinions about my behavior tonight. Vivian was perched in her usual spot, wine glass in hand, looking like a queen holding court. Brielle lounged beside her, phone in hand but eyes bright with interest. Oh honey, Vivian said with mock sympathy. I know you meant well, but you have to understand, tonight wasn't about you. It was about Trevor's career. His future. And you made it all about your little nursing stories. My little nursing stories, I repeated. She's right, Mia, Brielle chimed in. You kind of hijacked the whole conversation. It was awkward. I looked around the room at these three people. My husband, my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law. My family. The people who were supposed to love and support me. So let me understand this, I said slowly. When Andrea Braxton asked me about my work, directly asked me with genuine interest, I should have, what? Deflected? Changed the subject? Pretended I don't have a career. You should have been gracious and brief, Vivian said. A simple, oh, it's rewarding, would have been sufficient. Then you steer the conversation back to Trevor, to his accomplishments. Because his accomplishments matter and mine don't? Because tonight was about him. Trevor exploded. For once in your life, couldn't you have just supported me without making it about you? The accusation was so unfair, so completely backwards that I actually laughed. A short, bitter sound that seemed to surprise everyone, including myself. Supported you? Trevor, I've done nothing but support you for 3 years. I've rearranged my schedule around your needs. I've let your mother redecorate our house, throw away my belongings, dictate my wardrobe. I've smiled and nodded while you dismiss my job, my opinions, my worth as a human being. And you think tonight was about me not supporting you? Mia. No, I'm talking now. The words came pouring out, 3 years of suppressed hurt and anger finally finding their voice. I made one brief comment about my work. Work that I'm good at, work that matters, work that helps people. And you acted like I'd committed some terrible crime. You told our guests that I oversell my role and do basic bedside care. You diminished everything I've worked for, everything I am, because it might have made you look less important for 5 minutes. The room was dead silent now. Even Brielle had put down her phone. You made your choice tonight, Mia, Trevor said, his voice cold. You chose to embarrass me, to put yourself first, to show everyone that you don't respect me or our marriage. Well, congratulations. You got your moment in the spotlight. And you made your choice too, I said quietly. You chose to tear me down in front of people who were trying to lift me up. You chose to protect your ego instead of your wife. You chose to side with your mother's cruelty instead of standing up for the woman you married. How dare you? How dare I what? Speak the truth? Point out that in 3 years of marriage you've never once defended me? Never once told your mother to back off? Never once treated me like I matter? Trevor's face was flushed with anger now, his carefully maintained composure finally cracking. You want to know what matters? I'll tell you what matters. He raised his hand. And for the first time in our marriage I didn't flinch. Do it, I said quietly. Show them exactly who you really are. That's when the slap came. That's when his mother laughed. That's when my father walked into the room with 2 armed soldiers. And that's when everything changed. The silence stretched like a held breath. My father stood in the doorway, his presence filling the room in a way that had nothing to do with his physical size. Colonel James Camden was not a large man, but 30 years in the military had given him something more powerful than height or bulk. An absolute, unshakable authority that made everyone in the room suddenly feel like children caught misbehaving. Behind him, the 2 soldiers remained perfectly still, their eyes scanning the room with professional precision. They weren't pointing weapons or making threats. They didn't need to. Their very presence spoke volumes about the seriousness of the situation. Mia, Dad said quietly, never taking his eyes off Trevor. Are you hurt? I touched my burning cheek, tasting blood where my teeth had cut the inside of my mouth. I'm okay. No, he said. You're not. But you will be. Trevor had gone pale, his raised hand dropping slowly to his side. Colonel Camden, I can explain. Can you? Dad's voice remained conversational, but something in his tone made Trevor step backward. Please. Explain to me why you just struck my daughter in front of witnesses. It wasn't, we were having a disagreement. Sergeant Justin, Dad said without turning around. What did you observe when we entered this room? One of the soldiers stepped forward slightly. Sir, I observed a male subject with his hand raised in an aggressive posture over a female who appeared to have been struck. The female showed visible signs of recent impact to the face. And you, Corporal Jenkins? Same observation, sir. Also noted 2 additional females in the room who appeared to be observing the altercation without intervening. Dad nodded slowly. So we have multiple witness accounts of domestic violence. Interesting. This is ridiculous, Vivian sputtered, finally finding her voice. This is a private family matter. You can't just barge in here with armed men. Mrs. Brennan, Dad said, turning those steel-gray eyes on her. I've been tracking your son's behavior toward my daughter for quite some time. Tonight was simply the final confirmation I needed. Trevor's face went from pale to gray. What are you talking about? Tracking. Dad smiled, the cold, calculated smile of a predator who'd finally cornered his prey. Did you really think I wouldn't notice when my daughter stopped calling? When she stopped visiting? When she started making excuses for bruises and canceling family dinners? I stared at him in shock. Dad, I never told you. You didn't have to, sweetheart. I've been a soldier for 30 years. I know what abuse looks like. I also know what happens when it's allowed to escalate unchecked. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila folder, placing it on the coffee table with deliberate precision. 3 months ago I hired a private investigator. Amazing what you can learn about a person when you really try. Trevor, did you know that your law firm has very strict policies about partners who engage in domestic violence? Something about maintaining the integrity of the practice. Trevor's face went white. You can't. I already have. The photographs, witness statements, and medical records are quite compelling. Your boss, Mr. Braxton, lovely man by the way, was very concerned when I shared them with him this afternoon. The room spun around me. This afternoon? Dad, you knew they were coming to dinner. I orchestrated it, sweetheart. I needed to see how he'd treat you in front of his superiors. I needed to know if there was any chance he might change, might become the man worthy of my daughter. His eyes found Trevor again. There wasn't. Brielle had gone completely silent, clutching her phone like a lifeline. Vivian looked like she was about to be sick. This is entrapment, Trevor said desperately. You can't use anything you obtained illegally. Oh, but I can, Dad said cheerfully. Because you see, I'm not trying to put you in prison, Trevor. Prison would be too easy. Too quick. What I'm doing is so much more comprehensive. He opened the folder and began laying out photographs on the coffee table. Pictures of me with bruises I'd forgotten about. Screenshots of text messages where Trevor berated me. Financial records showing how he'd isolated me economically. Your law firm received these this morning, Dad continued conversationally, along with a full report on your behavior. Domestic violence isn't just illegal, Trevor. It's a violation of the moral turpitude clause in your partnership agreement. You'll be suspended pending investigation, and given the evidence, termination is all but guaranteed. Trevor's legs gave out. He sank into a chair, staring at the photographs in horror. But that's not all, Dad said, his voice brightening as if he were sharing good news. Vivian, you might be interested to know that your country club has also received copies of these materials. Seems they have policies about members who enable domestic violence. Something about maintaining community standards. Vivian's wine glass slipped from her numb fingers, shattering on the marble floor. And Brielle, congratulations on your engagement. I hope your fiancé's family is understanding when they learn about your role in covering up your brother's abuse. Social media can be so unforgiving these days. You're destroying our lives, Vivian whispered. No, Dad said firmly. You destroyed your own lives the moment you decided my daughter was acceptable collateral damage for your family's dysfunction. I'm simply making sure there are consequences. He turned to me then, his expression softening for the first time since he'd entered the room. Mia, pack your bags and put them in my car. Your personal items, your important documents, and your grandmother's quilt. I retrieved from the garbage where these people threw it. It is safe. How did you? I've had people watching this house for weeks, sweetheart. I know every entrance, every hiding place, every secret these people thought they could keep. He held out his hand to me. It's time to come home. I looked around the room one last time, at the husband who'd just shown his true colors, at the mother-in-law who'd tortured me for years, at the sister-in-law who'd enabled it all. 3 years of my life, wasted on people who'd never valued me. But I wasn't that broken woman anymore. Standing there with my father's hand extended, surrounded by the consequences of their own actions, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. I felt free. Actually, Dad, I said, straightening my shoulders. I have something to say first. I looked at Trevor, really looked at him, and felt the strangest sense of clarity. This man who had controlled me through fear and manipulation suddenly seemed small, pathetic, utterly powerless. 3 years ago I married you because I thought I loved you, I said, my voice steady and clear. But I realize now that I was in love with a lie. The man I married, kind, supportive, loving, never existed. You showed me exactly who you were tonight, just like you've been showing me for years. I just wasn't ready to see it. Trevor opened his mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. I'm not finished. For 3 years I've apologized for things that weren't my fault. I've made myself smaller so you could feel bigger. I've let you and your family convince me that I was the problem, that I needed to change, that I wasn't enough. But tonight, when Andrea Braxton looked at me with respect, real respect, I remembered something important. I turned to face Vivian, who was still staring at the shattered wine glass at her feet. Vivian, you spent 3 years trying to erase me, replacing everything I was with your vision of what Trevor's wife should be. You threw away my grandmother's quilt like it was garbage, but you know what? That quilt survived the Great Depression, World War II, and 3 generations of strong women. Just like I'm going to survive you. Vivian's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. And Brielle, I continued, turning to my sister-in-law, you enabled every cruel thing your mother did to me. You laughed at my pain, participated in my humiliation, and stood by while your brother hit me. That makes you just as guilty as he is. Brielle's phone had started buzzing insistently, probably her fiancé, wondering why pictures of tonight's scene were already appearing on social media. Dad's people had been thorough. But here's what you all failed to understand, I said, taking a step closer to Trevor. I'm not just a nurse. I'm a damn good nurse. I save lives. I comfort children who are afraid. I make a difference in this world every single day. And that matters. That has value. That is enough. Trevor's face crumpled. Mia, please. We can work this out. I'll get help, I'll change. No, I said firmly. You had 3 years to change. 3 years to choose love over control, respect over dominance, partnership over ownership. Instead, you chose to hit me in front of your mother while she laughed. There's no coming back from that. I pulled off my wedding ring, the beautiful diamond that had once symbolized forever, and set it on the coffee table next to the photographs of my bruises. This marriage is over. My lawyer will be in touch about the divorce proceedings. I went upstairs and packed my bags just as Dad instructed. You can't just leave, Vivian said desperately. We're family. We can fix this. I turned to look at her one last time. Family doesn't throw away the things you love. Family doesn't laugh when someone gets hurt. Family doesn't enable abuse and call it love. You were never my family, Vivian. You were my jailers. Dad stepped forward then, his hand still extended. Ready now, sweetheart? I took his hand, feeling the strength and steadiness I'd inherited from him flowing through me. I'm ready. As we walked toward the door, flanked by the 2 soldiers, I heard Trevor call out behind us. Mia, wait. You can't do this. I love you. I stopped at the threshold and looked back at him one last time. If this is what you call love, Trevor, then you don't know what the word means. And then I walked out of that house and into the rest of my life. 6 months later. The pediatric wing of St. Mary's Hospital was quiet in the early morning hours. I'd just finished my rounds, checking on my little patients, adjusting 4 drips and reassuring worried parents. It was the work I'd always loved, but now it felt different somehow. More meaningful, more mine. Nurse Camden. A small voice called from room 312. I smiled, heading toward the voice. Emma, age 6, post-surgery for a kidney condition, had been my patient for 3 days. She was scared, homesick, and desperately missing her dog. What's up, sweetheart? I asked, settling into the chair beside her bed. I can't sleep. My tummy hurts and I keep thinking about Buster. What if he forgets me? Oh, honey, I said, taking her small hand in mine. Dogs don't forget the people they love. Buster is probably sitting by your bedroom door right now, waiting for you to come home. Really? Really? And you know what? When you get out of here tomorrow, he's going to be so excited to see you that he'll probably knock you over with kisses. Emma giggled, the sound bright in the dim room. He does that even when I just come home from school. That's because you're his favorite person in the whole world. I stayed with her until she fell asleep, singing the same lullaby my grandmother used to sing to me, the one I remembered every time I looked at the quilt now spread across my bed in my new apartment. My phone buzzed as I stepped out of her room. A text from my father. Saw the news. Thought you should know. Attached was a link to a local business journal article. The headline read, Brennan and Associates under investigation for partner misconduct. I scrolled through the article, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. Trevor had been officially terminated from the firm. The investigation had revealed not just the domestic violence evidence Dad had provided, but also financial irregularities and client complaints that had been swept under the rug due to his family connections. The law firm was now facing a class action lawsuit from former clients who claimed Trevor had mishandled their cases. Another text popped up, this one from my lawyer. Vivian's attorneys want to settle the defamation suit out of court. She's offering full restitution for your personal items plus damages. Looks like social media exile is expensive. I smiled, remembering how Vivian's perfect reputation had crumbled within weeks of Dad's revelation. The country club expulsion had been just the beginning. When the photos and recordings went viral, carefully edited to protect my privacy while exposing their cruelty, Vivian had become a social pariah overnight. Her charity board positions, her volunteer work, her entire carefully constructed image had disappeared like smoke. The best part? She couldn't even blame me. Every bit of evidence had come from their own actions, their own words, their own choices. Mia. Dr. Arabella Cohen appeared at my elbow. Your 7 a.m. surgery prep is ready in room 318. And congratulations, by the way. Congratulations. He grinned. Check your email. The promotion committee met yesterday. My hands shook as I pulled up my work email on my phone. There it was. Congratulations on your promotion to pediatric nursing supervisor. Your leadership qualities and dedication to patient care make you an obvious choice for this role. The position I'd been quietly working toward for years, the one Trevor had always dismissed as not worth the stress. The one that came with a significant salary increase and the authority to implement the family support programs I'd been dreaming about. I thought about calling someone to share the news, then realized with a start that I wanted to call my father. Not because I needed his approval but because I knew he'd be proud. There was a difference, one I was still learning to recognize. Another text, this one from an unknown number. Mia, it's Andrea Braxton. I got your number from the hospital directory. Would you be interested in speaking at our Women's Leadership Conference next month? We need someone who understands the importance of finding your voice. I stared at the message, remembering that terrible dinner party 6 months ago. Andrea had reached out several times since then, not out of pity but out of genuine respect for what I'd survived and overcome. She'd become an unexpected mentor, showing me what supportive professional relationships actually looked like. I'd be honored, I typed back. Good news? Dr. Cohen asked, noticing my smile. The best, I said. It feels like my life is finally beginning. 1 year later. The conference room at St. Mary's was packed with nurses, doctors and healthcare administrators. I stood at the front, looking out at their faces. Some eager, some skeptical, all curious about the new pediatric nursing supervisor who'd implemented 3 groundbreaking programs in her first year. Patient advocacy isn't just about medical care, I was saying. It's about seeing the whole person, their fears, their needs, their dignity. It's about standing up for those who can't stand up for themselves. A hand shot up from the middle of the room. What about when advocacy puts you in conflict with authority figures? How do you navigate that? I smiled, thinking of all the times I'd failed to advocate for myself, all the moments I'd stayed silent when I should have spoken up. That's the hardest part, I admitted. But I've learned that the cost of staying silent is always higher than the cost of speaking up. Your voice has power, use it. After the presentation, I was packing up my materials when someone cleared their throat behind me. Excuse me, Miss Camden? I turned to find a young woman, maybe 25, with nervous eyes and a bruise on her wrist that she was trying to hide with her sleeve. I'm Lisa, she said quietly. I'm a new nurse here and I was wondering if I could talk to you sometime. Privately. My heart clenched. I saw myself in her nervous posture, her careful way of speaking, the way she kept glancing at the door as if someone might be watching. Of course, I said gently. My office is always open. Or if you'd prefer somewhere more private, we could get coffee. Relief flooded her face. Coffee would be good. There are some things, some situations I'm dealing with at home and I heard you might understand. I do understand, I said. And I want you to know, whatever you're going through, you're not alone. She nodded, tears threatening to spill. Thank you. I've been trying to figure out how to find the courage. The courage is already there, I told her. Sometimes we just need help recognizing it. After she left, I sat in my office for a long moment, thinking about the chain reaction that had started with Dad walking into that living room. My freedom had led to Trevor's downfall, which had led to my promotion, which had led to programs that helped other people find their strength. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Dad's name appeared on the screen. Hey, Dad. Hey, sweetheart. How did the presentation go? Really well. I think we're going to get approval for the domestic violence screening program. I'm proud of you, Mia. Not just for surviving what you went through, but for turning it into something that helps others. I smiled, looking out my office window at the city beyond. I had a good teacher. Speaking of which, how's retirement treating you? He chuckled. Can't complain. Though I may have found a new project. There's a veterans support program that could use some organizational help. Dad, I said laughing. You've been retired for 3 months. You're supposed to be relaxing. Relaxing is overrated. Besides, some battles are worth fighting even when the war is officially over. After we hung up, I pulled out the file for my next project proposal. A support group for healthcare workers dealing with domestic violence. The statistics were staggering. The same people who spent their days caring for others often went home to situations where they received no care at all. My computer chimed with a new email. The sender's name made me do a double take. Brielle Brennan Morrison. I hesitated before opening it. In the year since I'd left Trevor, I'd heard bits and pieces about his family through the legal proceedings. Vivian had moved to Florida to live with her sister, her reputation in shambles. Trevor had declared bankruptcy and was working at a small firm in another state. But Brielle. Dear Mia, the email began. I know I have no right to contact you and I understand if you delete this without reading it. But I needed to try to apologize for my part in what happened to you. My engagement ended 6 months after when the photos from that night surfaced. At first I was angry, at you, at your father, at the whole situation. But as time passed I started to understand what we had done to you. What I had done. I watched my brother hurt you and I said nothing. I participated in my mother's cruelty and I called it family loyalty. I enabled abuse and convinced myself it wasn't my responsibility to stop it. I've started therapy to understand why I made those choices. I'm learning about trauma, about enabling behaviors, about the damage we cause when we stay silent in the face of injustice. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even think I deserve it. But I wanted you to know that your courage in leaving, and the way you've rebuilt your life, has inspired me to finally examine my own behavior and try to become a better person. I hope you're happy. You deserve all the happiness in the world. Real. I read the email twice, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Anger at how long it had taken her to see the truth. Sadness for the years I'd lost. But also something unexpected. A small flicker of hope that maybe, sometimes, people really could change. I wouldn't respond to the email. That chapter of my life was closed and I had no interest in reopening it. But I was glad to know that the ripples of that night continued to spread, forcing people to confront uncomfortable truths about themselves. My phone buzzed with a text from Lisa, the young nurse from earlier. Would tomorrow at 2 p.m. work for coffee? I'm ready to talk. Perfect, I texted back. I'll be there. As I gathered my things to leave the office, I caught my reflection in the window. The woman looking back at me was someone I barely recognized from a year ago. Confident, purposeful, unafraid. She had scars, we all do, but they were proof of battles fought and won, not wounds that needed hiding. I thought about 7-year-old Emma who'd gone home to her dog Buster and sent me a drawing of the two of them playing in their backyard. I thought about Andrea Braxton who'd become not just a mentor but a genuine friend. I thought about Dad who'd taught me that sometimes love means having the courage to fight for what's right. And I thought about Lisa who would learn what I'd learned, that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision that something else is more important than the fear. Walking out of the hospital into the warm evening air, I felt something I'd almost forgotten how to feel. I felt powerful. The wedding was small, just close friends, family, and a few colleagues from the hospital. I stood in front of the mirror in my childhood bedroom, adjusting the simple white dress I'd chosen myself, without input from anyone who thought they knew better. You look beautiful, sweetheart. I turned to find Dad in the doorway, handsome in his dress blues, medals gleaming on his chest just like they had at my first wedding. But this time felt different. This time I wasn't a young woman trying to please everyone. I was a woman who knew her own worth. Thank you for everything, Dad, I said, taking his offered arm. For seeing what I couldn't see. For fighting when I couldn't fight. For believing I was worth saving. You saved yourself, Mia. I just made sure you had the chance to do it. The ceremony was in the hospital's memorial garden, surrounded by flowers and sunshine and people who genuinely cared about my happiness. Dr. Arabella Chin had offered to officiate. She'd gotten ordained online specifically for the occasion, claiming it was the least she could do for her favorite supervisor. But this wasn't a traditional wedding. There was no groom waiting at the altar, no vows of till death do us part. Instead, I stood before my chosen family and made promises to myself. I, Mia Camden, promised to honor my own voice, to trust my own judgment, and to never again make myself small for someone else's comfort. I promised to continue healing, growing, and helping others find their strength. I promised to remember that I am enough, exactly as I am. The crowd, my real family chosen rather than inherited, cheered as I slipped a simple silver ring onto my own finger. A promise ring, a commitment ring, a reminder that the most important relationship I'd ever have was the one with myself. Later, at the reception in the hospital cafeteria, transformed with fairy lights and flowers donated by grateful patients' families, I found myself surrounded by love in its truest form. Colleagues who respected my work. Friends who valued my friendship. Patients' families who'd been touched by my care. And in the corner, mostly unnoticed by the other guests, sat Lisa. No longer the frightened young nurse who'd asked for help 2 years ago, but a confident woman who now ran her own support group for healthcare workers in abusive relationships. Speech, someone called out, and soon the whole room was chanting for me to speak. I stood up, looking around at these faces, My chosen family, my real family, the people who'd supported my journey back to myself. 2 years ago I thought my life was over, I began. I'd lost myself so completely that I didn't even remember who I'd been before. But I learned something important. You can't destroy someone who refuses to stay broken. Applause filled the room, but I held up my hand. The woman who was hit in that living room, who was laughed at and belittled and made to feel worthless, she's still part of me. But she's not all of me. She's the part that learned resilience, that developed empathy, that understands how precious it is to be truly seen and valued. I caught Dad's eye across the room. He was trying not to cry and failing completely. So today isn't just about celebrating my freedom from an abusive marriage. It's about celebrating the woman I've become because of that struggle. It's about recognizing that sometimes the worst things that happen to us become the foundation for the best things we do. I raised my glass of sparkling cider. Here's to second chances, chosen families, and the courage to rewrite our own stories. Here's to knowing that we are all worthy of love, especially from ourselves. As the room erupted in cheers and applause, I felt a deep sense of completion. Not the kind that comes from finding someone else to complete you, but the kind that comes from finally becoming whole on your own. Later that evening, as I sat in my apartment, my space decorated with my things, filled with my choices, I pulled out a letter I'd been working on. It was addressed to no one in particular, but it contained everything I wished I could tell my younger self, everything I wanted other women to know. Dear woman who feels trapped, your situation is not your fault, but your healing is your responsibility. The person hurting you will not change because you love them enough, sacrifice enough, or become perfect enough. They will change only if they choose to do the work. And that choice has nothing to do with you. You are not crazy. You are not too sensitive. You are not asking for too much when you expect to be treated with basic human respect. Trust your instincts. They are trying to protect you. Leaving is not failure. Staying in a situation that destroys your soul is not love. You do not owe anyone your destruction, not even family, not even the person you married. You have more strength than you know. You have more options than you can see right now. You have more value than anyone who hurts you will ever be able to recognize. Your voice matters. Your dreams matter. You matter. And when you finally find the courage to walk away, know that there are people waiting to catch you, to support you, to help you remember who you really are. You are worth fighting for. You are worth saving. You are worth the hard work of rebuilding your life. Start with one step. Then another. Then another. You are stronger than you know. Love, a woman who made it out. I folded the letter carefully and added it to the stack I'd been collecting for months. Tomorrow I'd give them to Lisa to distribute in her support groups. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is share our stories, let other people know they're not alone in their struggles. As I got ready for bed, I caught sight of my grandmother's quilt, rescued, restored, and now spread across my own bed in my own home. The stitches were still strong after all these years, holding together pieces that had been carefully chosen and lovingly arranged. Just like me. Just like all of us who refuse to stay broken. I turned off the lights and settled into bed, surrounded by the silence of my own space, the peace of my own choices, the safety of my own strength. And for the first time in years I slept without fear. Because I had finally learned the most important lesson of all. The person responsible for protecting Mia Camden was Mia Camden. And I was very, very good at my job.